and thank you for joining us here at the First Alert Desk on Atlanta News First Plus as we continue to take you through some of the weather coverage that we are anticipating today. Today happens to also be the 1-year anniversary of devastating tornadoes that rocked the Griffin, Spalding, and Troup County communities. Excuse me, I have the wrong graphic here as I change over to the correct one. I just want to start by showing you some of the images from last year. Again, this just rocked several communities. Recovery efforts still underway 1 year later to the day. January 12th, 2023 was one of the worst days for some of these homeowners that lost their family homes and communities that were just rocked. Here in a moment, we're going to be talking with Troup County Deputy Fire Chief and Emergency Management Administration Director Zachary Steele, just to talk a little bit about this anniversary and also prepare you for what's ahead still today. We're following possible severe storms and scattered showers. Our meteorologist Courtney Jakobi will be joining us to prepare you ahead of this afternoon so that you have everything you need to get ready. Let's start with a look at a year ago. Our Rebecca Schramm takes you through some of the devastation.
I'm at a location that really hasn't changed much in the last 12 months. This is the Vineyard Creek Apartments here in Griffin, and look at that. They've still got a tarp over this building. Management telling us they've had some setbacks with insurance, which has stalled the much-needed repairs. But yeah, let's remind you of what Spalding County and the town of Griffin looked like 1 year ago today. We later learned after that morning that 4 tornadoes were on the ground at the same time here, including an EF3 that ripped through the downtown area, a Hobby Lobby, you might remember. It had much of its roof torn off. And today, some good news, that store is under construction and is on track to reopen soon. We spoke with a woman who lives in Covington, but she grew up here in Spalding County and she still has some property here. It's outside the city limits. Her childhood home on Kendall Drive was destroyed and it still has not been rebuilt. She says that tornado completely changed the landscape of this community.
This little patch of area over there, it is just really thick. I mean, that's how all of this area used to be. You couldn't see the house next door because of the thick foliage that the trees were, but now all of that is gone. I mean, the trees have been leveled down. From what I know growing up from here, but 50 years ago, is nothing compared to where we are now.
Amazingly, with all that damage, not a single human life was lost here in Spalding County because of the tornadoes. A lot of folks are waking up this morning glad to hear from our meteorologist that the threat of severe weather and tornadoes has dropped significantly, but they had already canceled schools here as a precaution. In Griffin, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
And that was our Rebecca Schramm kind of talking a little bit about today. The risk for severe tornadoes, storm systems has gone down significantly. I just want to echo what Rebecca just mentioned. But we still, talk a little bit about the anniversary and comparing it to what we're going to see today. Definitely not on the same scale, looking ahead to a year later. I want to now bring in Deputy Fire Chief for Troup County, also the Emergency Management Administration Director, a man that really looks over Troup County during their most scary times, you might say, for severe weather. Deputy Chief Zachary Steele joining us now. Deputy Chief, talk to me a little bit about the anniversary. I mean, it's an emotional time. Spalding really experienced the weight of the devastation, but Troup County was also, I mean, you all were responding and ready on that day, January 12th, 2023.
Yeah, it was a long day. About a year ago today, it's hard to believe it's been that long, but, early in that afternoon, we started tracking the storm system. I believe it started in Selma, Alabama, or in the immediate surrounding areas there. And we were in contact with Dave Nadler and his team at the National Weather Service about an hour out, and they advised us, that storm's moving pretty quick. It's on a direct line towards Troup County and LaGrange communities. And so we were making some final preparations there, and sure enough, within about an hour, given a few minutes there, hit or take, we were hit. We got hit in the northern part of the county to start with, and then a second EF2 tornado spawned off of that first storm and created the downtown LaGrange, which most of our residential damage was in that storm. And that was the same storm system that ended up riding the track all the way to Griffin, where they sustained substantial damage, but I believe it was EF3 by the time it got there. So we were the first Georgia impacts of that storm. You're exactly right. It was a very emotional day for a lot of families here, but we've done our best in a year's time to be prepared to not let those situations happen again and be the best we can to be diligent in preparing our citizens.
And talk to me a little bit about the ongoing response for these residents who are still to this day recovering and picking up their lives from what was a year ago.
Well, it's very difficult for some people. Luckily, I want to thank Governor Brian Kemp, Director Chris Stallings from GEMA, working with Area 4 from FEMA and all the way up to President Biden's office to getting us that federal declaration within 4 days, which provided some resources to our citizens. I believe there were 7 counties in the state of Georgia that were eligible for that. And what that did was provide some of the underinsured or non-insured property with some resources. Small Business Administration came in, but it also supplemented some of the government funding for damage to the critical infrastructure, debris removal, and any of the emergency protective actions that were taken during that. But there's some long-term effects that go deeper than just residential damage. You have psychological effects of people that never truly recover from living out those events. So we've been able to find resources to try to supplement those and try to serve and help recover as best we can for our citizens. It's important to remember that the response is 2 to 3 days roughly in an event like that, and it shifts to a short-term recovery and a long-term recovery. And while we were facing the recovery process, we actually sustained another tornado in Troup County on February the 17th, and then the devastating one in March 26th down in the West Point community. So it was a trying year there. So we weren't just trying to recover from one, as we were trying to deal with several tornadoes last year.
And really, it was the work of your team and the work of the community that helped so many on that day and then in the months and now a year later. Talk to me a little bit about today. I know we're not expecting the same severity, but we are still looking out for possible severe storms and some of those scattered showers that our team here is tracking. I'm sure your team is hard at work preparing for. Anything that the community should know about and just prepare for?
Absolutely. It's important to remain vigilant in this. People can let their guards down fairly easy and say, it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen there. But this severe thunderstorms that we've faced, not only in the events last year, but, even as early as Tuesday of this week and what we're monitoring today is, these supercells can pop up and, tornadoes can spin up very quickly. So we stay in contact with a lot of our partners at the National Weather Service, Dave Nadler, Keith Stillman, their team, Peachtree City, they're great. But I have a pretty good relationship and talk quite a bit with Cutter Martin and the Atlanta News First meteorologist team as well. And we have a lot of dialogue. So getting all that information from multiple places allows us to provide the best information for our citizens possible. And it's just important for them to know that it's not something we come to work and say, all right, if this happens, we're going to do this. We're constantly making preparations. We're having briefings. We're having meetings. We're having internal conversations about, hey, if this happens, what can we do there? So we're better prepared. And we're always monitoring and we're always ready to go. And we use a Civic Ready platform for mass notifications in Troup County and all Hogansville, West Point, and LaGrange as well. And that's important to sign up for that for us to be able to push out any real-time updates that the citizens or visitors of Troup County need to know.
Any final thoughts ahead of today?
We're just monitoring it. Obviously, staying in touch with all the platforms that we have and the resources to get that information out to our citizens. We have a very small team monitoring in the Emergency Operations Center today, and we'll provide any information available to our citizens as quickly as we can. But it's just important to remember that with the storm system we're dealing with today, it's not a true squall line coming from west to east. It's a lot of pop-up storms as the cold and warm fronts are moving around. So these storms can pop up, and just so you don't see anything on the radar as a citizen and the Weather Channel, don't take for granted that some of these storms could pop up and be extremely severe.
Again, Troup County EMA Director, Deputy Fire Chief Zachary Steele, thank you so much for joining us in this valuable and life-saving information.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, and as we continue to talk about ahead of today, really, I want to bring in our First Alert meteorologist, Courtney Jakobi, with a look at what you can expect.
That's right. Yeah, thanks so much, Maria. We, of course, have our first alert weather day today, and I think that Mr. Steele said some awesome things that, preparation is key, and that's what our first alerts are for, to kind of just get you prepared, give you that heads up. And thankfully, today's severe threat looking a little bit lower than originally anticipated a couple of days ago. We're going to explain why, but there is still a severe threat nonetheless, so we do need to take that seriously, and we're going to cover everything you need to know to get through it. But first, I want to talk about, especially with it being the 1-year anniversary of the tornadoes in some of our southern communities, I want to talk about the ingredients that are needed for tornadoes, and then we're going to lead into essentially what ingredients are missing potentially to lessen our tornado threat today. So we're going to cover a whole bunch here, and as you can see over my shoulder, we do have the graphic that is showing you exactly what you need for tornado development. And if I can have Maria, can you come take this lower third off, because I'm just not exactly sure how? That would be fantastic. Thank you so much. So for tornado development, you need some sort of fuel, which is in the form of heat, but also in the form of moisture. And that's why areas to our south, you probably see the Florida Panhandle, southern Alabama, South Georgia, they get lit up with tornado warnings in severe weather season because they're closer to that moisture-rich source known as the Gulf of Mexico. And so how far that moisture can retreat north is usually a pretty big question for us here in North Georgia. Now, in the summertime, that Gulf provides us plenty of heat and moisture, so our severe weather as we head into the spring and the summer, always on par. But in the wintertime, it's a little more difficult to get that moisture as far north, and especially that heat as far north as us here in Atlanta. Now, you also need a little bit of lift, and that's going to be in the form of a cold front in a lot of cases, and that's what we'll be watching today. But you also need spin, so you need some wind shear, which is that change in wind speed and direction with height. And this time of year, wind shear is usually the main factor in our severe weather because we have our jet stream dipping far south, very far south, and that creates in the upper levels of the atmosphere a change in wind direction, but then our wind at the surface usually moving a little slower. Sometimes we have surface features that make our wind come out of a different direction. So in the wintertime, sometimes that wind shear, you don't even need the heat because your wind shear is so high, you can still get severe weather, including tornadoes. So taking a look at first alert radar here, we have rain already starting to move in, some rumbles of thunder starting to move into northwest Georgia. That red box there, that is a tornado watch for parts of Mississippi. We have had a handful of tornado warnings already out to our west, and it's all along a much larger weather system that is starting to what we call occlude. So when a weather system starts to occlude, that means that the definition between the warm and the cold front is starting to lessen. So ultimately, that means that the severe weather threat is starting to lessen. And what we're going to be looking for is this. So again, I talked about the heat and the moisture that you need in order to have a more heightened tornado threat. Not necessarily just a tornado threat, but for us, you really need all three of those ingredients, the fuel, the lift, and that spin to come together in order to have a heightened tornado threat. Today, the ingredient that's lacking is going to be the heat. So underneath a warm front is warm air, just like behind a cold front is cold air. And this system, as we've kind of watched it progress across the lower 48, it started to weaken a little sooner. So I talked about that occlusion. So when a front starts to occlude, that means it's starting to weaken. It's not continuing to strengthen. And that's what's going on right now. So that kind of helped knock down our severe threat a little bit. But also the warm front that we're watching, that's not necessarily going to go right over us. So that warm front right now is kind of squeezing in Alabama, which is why those thunderstorms are actively ongoing back out in Alabama. But that warm front's going to kind of slide just to our south and really pull in some of that warm and unstable air, places mainly south of I-20. So yes, unfortunately, we are looking at places like Troup and Meriwether counties, Butts County, Lamar County, Upson County, places that did have severe weather this time last year. A really strange coincidence, but weather does work pretty cyclically. So, It is a strange coincidence, but probably not to Mother Nature. So again, this is what we're looking for, is how far north was that warm front going to lift? And it just doesn't look like that warm front's going to lift far enough to give us that more widespread severe weather threat that we were thinking a couple of days ago. And notice the blue there. So that's cooler air. Cool air is stable. And so essentially, we talk about wedges a lot here in North Georgia. They impact us because of our proximity to the mountains. So you'll get these high pressures to set up north of us and spill in colder air. And essentially, that's what's happening right now. We have that cool and stable air that's impacting not only how far that warm front's going to lift, but also that extra ingredient needed for the potential for tornadic storms. So not that our tornado threat is none, but it's definitely further south where that warm front's going to lift a little further north and just provide that trifecta of ingredients that you need for tornadic cells to really spawn up. So here's a look at our severe risks for today. Wind is definitely going to be the big one again, which we've already had reports in Dade County of some trees coming down. We picked up record rainfall the other day on Tuesday. So the ground is still saturated. It doesn't just automatically bounce back. So with the wind already picking up, we do have a wind advisory for North Georgia, widespread wind gusts upwards of 35 miles per hour today. That could take down trees as the rain continues to fall with that already saturated ground. But the tornado threat is not none. Notice it's very low, slightly higher for our neighbors to the south, places like Troup, Meriwether, Upson counties. That's where we're going to be watching primarily for any kind of spin-up tornado. What you're going to look at here is what we call STP, the significant tornado parameter. It takes into account things like helicity, so the spin in the atmosphere, the fuel in the atmosphere, and ultimately creates a product to give us a little bit of an idea of what our tornado threat's going to look like. And when you start to see the orange colors like you saw out in Mississippi, that's why they have that tornado watch right now, that tornadoes are possible because their environment's pretty prime for it. But here at home, we're mainly going to look south of here. So central Georgia, more towards the Macon area. That's where I think they have a greater threat for tornadoes tonight. Notice we don't really get any of that white or gray color indicating a very low tornado threat. But if we were to see any of that, that's going to be, again, mainly Troup, Meriwether County, maybe Lamar and Pike County. And that's where I think we'll be watching. This isn't necessarily an exact science. This is a good tool to look at, but it doesn't mean that if you don't show color in your area that you don't have a threat for tornadoes. This is just kind of giving you a good idea of where the ingredients are prime for them, but doesn't necessarily mean that that means you're immune to one as our storm system rolls through. So let's take you through our first alert weather day. Again, our severe threat a little less, but that doesn't mean that the weather isn't going to still be impactful regardless of our lower tornado threat. The wind is still going to roar. The rain is going to come down heavy. Our flooding threat might be lower, but just because of the event we experienced only a few days ago, you pair the wind and more heavy rain, that could lead to some more downed trees today, which is clearly very dangerous. So just really want to emphasize, as we make our way through the day today with this timing, a lot of kids are out of school. I know today we had several school districts closed today or shift their schedule. You can find all those details, by the way, on AtlantaNewsFirst.com, on the Atlanta News First app. If you're trying to kind of just go about your day today, you need to be really careful. This is a city in the trees, and a lot of our streets are lined with trees, and just as the rain falls, the wind picks up and continues through the day. You just need to be really, really careful, as it is possible that some of those trees come down. So, and unfortunately, we did see an incident where a tree did fall on one of our interstates and land on someone's car. So, not saying that that is going to be likely, but I am saying that you need to be vigilant today, just because of this really active pattern we've been in that we'll continue to have today. So, our first alert weather days are days when we think that the weather could impact your safety, and I definitely think that it could today. Let's take you through the timing of everything. So it's already raining out there right now. You've probably heard some of those heavier downpours over your roof or maybe in your office buildings. As we head towards 2 o'clock, notice north of Carrollton there, that little cell. That's what we're going to be watching for in the afternoon. I do think West Georgia, from Carrollton down to LaGrange, so the wedge, that colder, more stable air, that's not necessarily impacting you as much. So I think from Carrollton down to LaGrange, we're going to watch for a few cells out ahead of our front that could take advantage of the wind shear, which is very high, that spin in the atmosphere, for maybe an isolated tornado. Up in the mountains, while you could receive some heavy rain and damaging wind, I don't see a tornado threat for you today. But again, the wind and the rain combined could cause problems just within itself. Physical cold front moves in around 3 o'clock, pushes east. That'll impact your evening commute tonight, and then we can let our guard down as we head towards 6, 7 o'clock this evening. So as you're kind of settling in for the night tonight, starting to enjoy your weekend, we'll be able to let our guard down. Of course, we are going to continue with your forecast. Full details. Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez will be on Atlanta News First at noon to give you all of the details on our First Alert Weather Day, and we'll pick back up right here on Atlanta News First Plus starting at 12:30 to give you all of the details on your forecast. We're going to talk about the wind. We're going to talk about our severe threats, give you a little bit of science knowledge, just give you a little bit of a deeper dive into our forecast today and our forecast pattern. And then we're going to shift from severe weather to the potential for winter weather for the start of next week. How about that? Very dynamic pattern here as we kick off 2024. Again, all those details will come your way at 12:30 as we continue right here on Atlanta News First Plus. In the meantime, make your way over to Atlanta News First, where the show will start at noon, and Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez will have everything you need to know.